friends. Welcome to another adventure with fantastic first grade frogs. Do you know what we're talking about today? It's fantastic, and actually, sometimes frogs like to eat them. Anyway, it's worms. Yes, worms. Worms are so exciting, and I just want to show you all about worms. So I went out in the front yard and I dug up some worms, and you can see that right now. Wormy, wormy, wormy.
So if you want to find a worm, you have to dig for them in the dirt in a nice wet spot. And that's what I'm trying to do here. Find a nice wet spot under the leaves to dig and find some good juicy worms. And I have 4 of them. So let's take them in the house and see more about worms.
So it was an adventure digging up worms in the front yard. Dug up a whole bunch of worms. I brought them in. I rinsed them off a little bit so you could see them, which I wouldn't ordinarily do because they kind of like to be dirty. I mean, they spend all their life in the dirt, right? And I put them over here so you can take a really close-up look at a worm. So here we are by the worm plate. And a worm, as you can see, doesn't have any legs, it doesn't have any arms, it doesn't have any eyes or a nose or anything like that. It doesn't have little ears sticking off the side of it. But you can always tell which end of the worm is its head because its head is the direction it's going. So, oops, somebody's trying to escape over here. So when we watch this worm on the plate, you can tell which way it's going, and you can watch it, and that's its head. So watch the worm for a minute. This has been a very active worm, and you can see it's doing a lot of wiggling around. And can you tell which way it's going? So which end would be its head? This end or this end? Yeah, this end would be its head. It's going this way. And a worm always heads toward its head. So this would be its other end. Now we have another worm that's trying to join it over here, trying to climb out of its container. I put these worms on some nice, moist, that means damp or wet, paper towels so that they would be happy. A worm breathes through its skin, so its skin has to stay moist all the time. It can't get too moist, like if it's raining, if it gets like into water, it will drown, but it has to be wet. So it has to have at least a little bit of water all the time so it can breathe. That's why when you see a worm on the sidewalk that hasn't been able to get back into the dirt, it kind of gets dried up and because it can't breathe through its skin. Okay. Worms also have these little itty bitty setae on the sides of their bodies that help them crawl through the dirt. And they're very small. You can't really see them unless you have a magnifying glass or a microscope. And they stick out on the 2 sides of them and they help them crawl through the dirt. I just keep looking at the worm to make sure he doesn't escape. So we're going to do a little bit of experiment with our worm friends here. I have several that I dug up. We're going to see, do worms prefer, that means like, do worms prefer dark or light? What do you think? Do you think worms would rather be in the dark or do you think they'd rather be in the light? We're going to do an experiment and find out. And what do you think? Do you think worms would like to be on wet or on dry? If we just let them go where they wanted to, would they go toward wet or would they go toward dry? Well, we're going to do an experiment right over here to find out. So let's take our little worm friends over here. And let's put them in this box. Now, I set up this box to have a wet side and a dry side. So the paper towel on this side of the box is wet, and the paper towel on this side of the box is dry. And Katie really wants to know why I have this box here. So we're going to take our little worm, a couple little worm friends, and we're going to kind of put them in the middle between the wet and the dry. And we're going to see where they decide to go. They decide to go to the wet side or the dry side. There we go. And we're going to leave them alone for a little while over here and let them do their thing. Okay, then over here I have another box. This whole thing is wet, so we're going to put the worms on their nice wet paper towel. But this time we're going to cover part of this with a bag. So I have this bag here. We're going to slide the bag over their worm box, just like that, and see if they like to be on the side that's under the bag that's dark, or if they like to be on this side where it's light. We're going to leave them alone for a little while and see where they end up. All right, so we'll come over and check on them again in a few minutes after we read our book. So while we're waiting for our worms to decide where they want to be, do they want to be in the wet or the dry? Do they want to be in the dark or the light? We're going to read some books about worms. And we're going to start out with a nonfiction book that's just called Worms. It's called Worms by Sian Smith. Now, there is a lovely table of contents in this book, and it tells us that we might find out about worm breath or about hairy movers. I wonder what that's about. We're going to read the whole book and find out more about worms. The first heading says, Hiding Underground. Let's meet a creature it's good to have around. The best way to find one is to dig in the ground. There's this great picture of a worm right under the ground. It's long, thin, and slimy. What is it, do you think? That's right, it's a worm. And most of them are pink. Just like our worms that we caught in the front yard, we have some lovely pink worms. Worms don't have eyes or fingers or many other parts, but inside a worm's body, it has 5 beating hearts. Can you imagine 5 hearts inside of a worm's body? A worm does have a mouth, but it's difficult to see. This worm's opened its mouth to eat a leaf from a tree, and they're showing us, here's the leaf, and here's the worm eating the leaf. How cool. Worm breath. Worms don't breathe through a mouth or even through a nose. Worms breathe through their skin. That's where the air goes. And the arrows are showing us that the air is going in through the worm's skin. To keep on breathing, worms need to stay wet. So a worm is a good choice if you want a slimy pet. Worms are kind of slimy, but that's only because they have to stay wet. If you had to stay wet all the time, you'd be kind of slimy too. Hairy movers. We really wanted to know about this, didn't we? Look at a worm's body closely, and small hairs can be found. These help the worm to move as it wiggles all around. Now they've taken a picture really, really up close of the worm's head, and you can see its mouth when I show you this picture. And it's also showing these little hairs, the setae, alongside the worm's body. And that's what helps it kind of dig into the soil and move along. Because if it was just slimy, it really couldn't get anywhere, but it has those little hairs to help it get places. Baby worms. Worms can make babies, and that's really quite nice. Babies hatch out of cocoons, which look like small grains of rice. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think I'd want to eat these small grains of rice. I'll put it way up close so you can really see it. They really do kind of look like little, tiny pieces of rice. But inside there are baby worms. Squishy brown piles. If you see a brown pile, do you know what you found? It comes out of a worm's bottom, but it's good for the ground. Here's that picture. Remember, everything that eats, well, the food has to go somewhere, so it comes out their back end after they've digested it. Somewhere on this page, there's a small worm to find. Look at all the hiding spots. Check in front and behind. And this time I'm going to show you the whole page. Look and see if you can find a hiding worm. Did you find it? It's right here behind that rock and kind of under the soil in the brown part. Cool, huh? So that book is Worms. I love that book, didn't you? Now, it's very fun to learn all about worms, but sometimes it's fun to read a fiction story about worms, a made-up story, a story that really couldn't happen. But it's fun to imagine if a worm was like a person, what would it be thinking? Like, would it go to worm school? Would it have a worm family? What would it do? So Doreen Cronin imagined that. So she's the author of Diary of a Worm, and Harry Bliss is the illustrator. He drew the pictures for this, and they imagined what it would be like if a worm was like a person. Diary of a Worm. It shows us some pictures. My report card. Spider made this for me. Baby picture of me and Dad. First day of school, me and Spider. My first tunnel. The family vacation on Compost Island. Diary of a Worm by Doreen Cronin and pictures by Harry Bliss. March 20th. Mom says there are 3 things I should always remember. Number 1, the earth gives us everything we need. Number 2, when we dig tunnels, we help take care of the earth. Must make tunnel, help earth breathe. Number 3, never bother Daddy when he's eating the newspaper. Chomp. March 29th. Today I tried to teach Spider how to dig. First, all his legs got stuck. I think I've twisted one of my ankles. Then he swallowed a bunch of dirt. Tomorrow he's going to teach me how to walk upside down. And Worm is saying, I give up. March 30th. Worms cannot walk upside down. April 4th. Fishing season started today. We all dug deeper. Did you guys hear something? I think I'd dig deeper too and get out of the way of the shovel. April 10th. It rained all night and the ground was soaked. We spent the entire day on the sidewalk. Hopscotch is a very dangerous game. So you think about what the worm is seeing. They see us playing hopscotch and that's scary. April 15th. I forgot my lunch today. I got so hungry that I ate my homework. My teacher made me write, I will not eat my homework 10 times. When I was finished, I ate that too. April 20th. I snuck up on some kids in the park today. They didn't hear me coming. I wriggled up right between them and they screamed. I love when they do that. You can see them running away. May 1st. Grandpa taught us that good manners are very important. So today I said good morning to the first ant I saw. He's saying good morning. There were 600 more of them in line. I stood there all day. He's saying good morning, good morning, good morning. How you doing? Good morning, nice to see you. Howdy, good morning. Look at all those ants. May 8th. Had the worst nightmare last night. Giant birds playing hopscotch. Mom says I have to stop eating so much garbage right before I go to bed. Wow, that would be a worm nightmare, wouldn't it? Giant birds playing hopscotch. May 15th. I got into a fight with Spider today. He told me you need legs to be cool. Then he ran. I couldn't keep up. Maybe he's right. May 16th. I made Spider laugh so hard he fell out of his tree. Who needs legs? Worm is special just the way he is, isn't he? He doesn't need any legs. May 28th. Last night I went to the school dance. You put your head in, you put your head out, you do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself about. That's all we could do. Remember when we did the hokey pokey? We put our right arm in and our right arm out. They don't have any arms. June 5th. Today we made macaroni necklaces in art class. I brought mine home and we ate it for dinner. You're very talented. And they're eating their macaroni. June 15th. My older sister thinks she's so pretty. I told her that no matter how much time she spends looking in the mirror, her face will always look just like her rear end. Spider thought that was really funny. Mom did not. Well, when you think about it, does a real worm really have eyes and nose and mouth? Nope. So does a real worm have a face that really kind of does look like its other end? Yep, a real worm does. You can't really tell them apart. July 4th. When I grow up, I want to be a Secret Service agent. Spider says I will have to be very careful because the president might step on me by mistake. It's a dangerous job, I told him, but someone's got to do it. Here he is being a Secret Service agent for the president. July 28th. 3 things I don't like about being a worm. I can't chew gum. I can't have a dog. Can we keep him, Mom? All that homework. July 29th. 3 good things about being a worm. I never have to go to the dentist. The dentist is saying no cavities, no teeth either. I never get in trouble for tracking mud through the house. Worms are pretty muddy, aren't they? I never have to take a bath. Who's my grubby little boy? August 1st. It's not always easy being a worm. We're small and sometimes people forget we're even here. But like Mom always says, the earth never forgets we're here. Bee stung me. Isn't this leaf awesome? I found this really cool rock. Mom and Dad's anniversary. Gross. My own comic. My sister's slumber party. My favorite pile of dirt. And his comic says Superworm. It says peace in the garden. Suddenly a bird came. Help us, Superworm. Holy compost, someone is in trouble. Moments later, hero of the garden. Superworm to the rescue. And that's the end. Wasn't that a silly story? All right, it's time to come over here and see what did our worms decide to do? Did they decide to go to the light side or the dark side? Did they like the wet side or the dry side? We need to find out. So let's go and find out. So here we are by the dark and light experiment. Now the dark and light experiment, we put a bag over one end to keep it dark on one side, and we have just the light shining on the other side. So let's see how many worms chose the dark side and how many worms chose to stay on the light side. Okay, Well, I see one worm who decided to stay out in the light. Oh, and the other worms decided to go where it's dark. It almost looks like, yep. And one worm decided to go where it's really dark underneath the whole thing. So what does it look like? Worms like the light or worms like the dark? It's looking like they like to be in the dark. Can't say I blame them. They live under the ground. Now let's see if they liked the wet or the dry. Well, the wet part has come all the way over to here. So we have one worm that's still on the dry part. But these two worms are on the wet part, and we have another guy who crawled all the way under. Oops, I can't even find him. Here, worm, worm, worm. Where'd you go? Oh, he crawled into the paper towel. My goodness, he's very talented. He got into the paper towel so they could be really, really wet. That is pretty talented, isn't it? So it appears we have 3 worms on the wet side and 1 worm on the dry side. So do you think worms like the wet or the dry? I'm thinking they like the wet side, which is very easy to explain by the fact that they need their skin wet in order to breathe. So they like to be where it's wet so they can breathe better. Interesting experiments about worms. So you can do your own worm experiments because I'm sure you have worms where you live too. You could go in your garden or your yard or anywhere and dig up a worm and take a good hard look at it. Look and figure out which end is its head, which end is its bottom, which end is its middle, and what can you see about its middle? Is there anything interesting about it? Now, worms have segments on their bodies. They don't have any bones in their bodies, but they do have segments. So you can kind of see the lines on their bodies. So in the middle part of the worm, look at it really close up and see if you can see the lines on their bodies, on their segments. You might also be able to feel alongside the worm where it's rough, where their little hairs are that help them move. So take a good hard look at your worm. You can also do an experiment like we did and see if it likes the wet or the dry. But don't forget, there's a couple important things to remember when you work with a live animal. One thing is you always have to remember to put the worm back where you found it. So you can't just leave it in a box and forget about it because the worm will die. And then it can't be out in the dirt, making the dirt all nice and healthy for our plants to grow. So we have to make sure the worm gets back to its home. And we also have to make sure we wash our hands really good with lots of good soap and water after we have the worm in our hands so that we clean off anything that might have gotten in our hands from the worm or from the dirt. Well, I hope you enjoyed our time with worms today, and I hope you can find some time to learn more about worms because worms are fascinating invertebrates. Invertebrates, that means they don't have any bones. Yes, they are fascinating invertebrates and they're really cool to learn about. So happy Worm Day, everybody. Bye. There you go, little worm. Thank you for playing with us today. There you go. Tuck you in, have some nice soil. There. Whoop. This worm doesn't want to go. There you are. Go back in the nice dirt. Have some dirt for dinner. There you go. They look so much happier now that they're back home. I don't know how to get this one out. It's really stuck. Come on out of there, little guy. Whoop! Oh dear. Alright, right down there in the soil. Oh, they look so much happier. Alright. There. Cover them up with some nice leaves.
There. There, our worms are all tucked back into their nice earthy ground where they can eat some nice food and grow into nice big worms and make things nice and healthy in the soil for our little plants. So I hope you enjoyed worms today. Happy Worm Day!